thank you for having me, and it's always a great pleasure to be back here. Well, thank you very much. And, what I do want to say here, and what I said to a number of people with whom I spoke today, is not to lose the focus from the Balkans. I believe that's the key message that I transmitted to all my counterparts here in DC. I know that the world is a big place, and I know that there are many places throughout the world now that are, complicated, complex, perhaps of more American interest than what the Balkans is. But the key message that I had today is not to lose the focus, and I believe this is very important. Coming back to the Balkans, I believe that the Balkans today is not, or let me put it otherwise, is a place more complicated than perhaps it was a few years ago from the political point of view. And I believe that in that regard, the role of United States is crucial for the stability and prosperity of the Western Balkans and of the Balkans in general. We can speak about the role of China in the Balkans, all major infrastructure projects that are currently being built by Chinese in the Balkans, the role of Russia in the Balkans, and obviously aspiration of many of the Balkan countries of the Western Balkans to become the part of the EU. So this is all very much interlinked and connected, and so this is to repeat again, the role of United States in the Western Balkans is crucial for the stability of the Western Balkans. It was actually myself who came up with the sentence. So when I became the president back in 2023, I came up with this ambitious target, but I still believe a reachable one, that Montenegro becomes 28th member state of the EU by 2028. The time has changed also in the EU, and I believe this is where the Russian war in Ukraine really played a major role, because Europe also understood that the enlargement is also about security of the European continent. And so now, finally, after many years, we have two for tango. Not only the will of a candidate country to join the EU, but also a political will of the EU itself to accept new member states. And I believe that out of all 10 candidate countries, there is a fact that Montenegro now is a front runner. Montenegro is by far the smallest among all the Balkan countries and among all the candidate countries who are willing to join the EU. But what I believe Montenegro can play as an exemplary role, where also the EU could, through the example of Montenegro, send a very clear message to all the other candidate countries that enlargement is on, is alive, is happening. And this is where I believe the process has also become political. So it's not anymore everything about ticking the boxes and closing the chapters. And to be very frank, it was never the case when the enlargement was happening. Think of Greece, or think of even Spain and Portugal in the 80s. It was a decision of the European leaders to enlarge towards the south, because south of Europe back then was, relatively unstable, and that was the way to bring not only stability and prosperity to southern European countries, but also to bring stability for Europe as a whole. And the same logic applied when, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when there was a political decision to enlarge towards the east. And it was never really about ticking the boxes. And I believe that European leaders forgot about that for a while, until the Russian war in Ukraine happened. So once again, we are living, in a political process of enlargement. Whether Montenegro now is, fully ready, who is ever fully ready? Nobody. But whether now is a good time to deliver on this goal, I believe absolutely yes. And I'm, a major promoter of this idea in Montenegro and in a wider region. And this is where I genuinely believe that Montenegro really can play this role model for all the other countries. But having said that, I do want also to, make an important a notion that in the minds of the people of Montenegro, we also believe that the stability and prosperity of the wider Balkan region is only in the EU. And for us, it is in our national interest that all the other countries from the region also join the EU as soon as possible. Absolutely, yes. And I have, kept asking for it over the last 2 years, and I got it. You cannot get it if you don't ask for it. So I remember the first time I attended there is a summit which is called European Political Community Summit. And the first one that I attended when I became the president was in June 2023 in the Republic of Moldova. And I was asking constantly that Montenegro should host, that summit. And eventually I got, the opportunity to be able to host the EU Western Balkan Summit exactly at the moment when Montenegro is celebrating 20 years since we have regained our independence. And I believe it's a very symbolic message that in June, exactly 20 years after we have regained our independence, we will be celebrating this moment with all European leaders in Montenegro, as well as with all the leaders from the neighborhood who will be coming in Montenegro. And I believe this is, in my opinion, the best possible way to present Montenegro as a future member of the EU, but also as a good neighbor. I believe that regional cooperation and being a good neighbor is just the other side of the coin of the European integration. Absolutely, because I believe that I'm a value-based politician who is really trying to make sure that we use the EU integration process to genuinely reform ourselves, not to use it as a PR thing. And many politicians do use it as a PR thing. For me, it's not a PR thing. It's an anchor, it's a roadmap to genuinely become a better society, to genuinely become a society where the rule of law exists in a full meaning of it, to become a genuinely reformed society from the perspective of the market economy, from the perspective of democratic development. So it was a bit of a political buzz because our parliament 2 days ago adopted 25 laws in half an hour, without reading them. And I raised the question, okay, you're being paid for one thing, to read the laws, read the law. So that was my point, do your job. And I think that my role in our society is to be this kind of corrective factor, the one who is able to say the things that are right. And I know that they understand that. So there is a bit of a political dynamic which I believe is a good one, because we are a democratic society. So I just want to make sure that from now on, the laws that the MPs are voting in the parliament are actually the laws that the MPs read and make sure that they are good for our society. That's the point. It's not really the point that you come in the parliament and raise the hand without reading the law. Because, you know, we can do that with AI now, right? We don't need people, you know, who are very well paid just to raise hands. Even if I return the laws back to the parliament, the MPs will still not read them. So, you know, I then just, you know, said, okay, you know, what's the point of postponing the process? I'm just gonna, you know, proclaim the laws. But you know, the whole thing was from the very beginning just to make a public point that everybody in the government, in the parliament, myself as a president, we all have a role to play. And we are all paid by citizens to do our job. That's it. It's as easy as that. Can you imagine, you know, going to see a doctor, ask him, you know, for an opinion, and the doctor gives you an opinion on, you know, on your condition without even, you know, checking your condition, right? It's a very similar situation. So this is why I wanted to make sure that from now on, all the laws are being read. Otherwise, we generally don't really need a parliament. You know, as I said, we can do it, you know, through the AI or by picking, you know, 81 random people from the street to do the job instead of the MPs who are, you know, being paid for doing the job. Maybe you know, maybe I'm too cruel, but you know, I genuinely think that I'm speaking the truth. Because, sorry to interrupt, you know, and my cabinet members asked me, you know, President, why are you making the point? And I said, you know, look, if this is the case, then why don't we adopt 1,000 laws immediately within an hour? If that's the point. But that's not the point, right? So the point is to read the law before, you know, voting for it. I think the geopolitical moment is as such that, you know, if we don't start a war in Montenegro, we would, you know, get in the EU by 2028, you know. So, and I think this is understood well by many of the politicians in Montenegro, and this is why they're using it, you know, to do many things that are genuinely not within the European standards. So, you know, once again, and this is a scenario that I have also elaborated in front of students of the University of Montenegro. They're basically, you know, in this relationship between the EU and the candidate country, there are 4 scenarios. Depending on 2 factors that are, you know, key factors for the accession. Those are political will of the European Union to have the country in. That's crucial. And the second factor is the political will of the candidate country to reform itself enough to get in, to be allowed to get in, right? Because, you know, you need to achieve certain standards. And depending on those 2 factors, you have 4 scenarios. The first one is a scenario where, you know, the EU really doesn't have a political will to get the candidate country in. Neither the candidate country is generally interested to go in. I'm not going to name the names, but there is a big country which is still a candidate country, which is part of the scenario. The second scenario is the one where the country really, you know, the candidate country really does something, you know, pursues a reform agenda, but the EU doesn't really have a political will to have the country in. And just to remind you, North Macedonia was you know, part of this story. You remember it was the country that even changed its name, not to mention constitution, many times. And the EU just didn't really do much about it. The third scenario is the one where, you know, the EU has a political will, but the candidate country doesn't really use the process to structurally change itself. I believe that's a bad scenario in the long run, because even if the country gets in, it's not a credible and sustainable member of the union. So, and this is the scenario where some of the politicians are counting for. This is when I talk about the PR and, using, when you want something to be passed in the parliament, you just say, oh, European Union has already green-lighted it. Nobody knows, by the way, what's happening, because, it's a complicated bureaucratic process. And the fourth scenario is the one that I'm, really promoting, advocating, and politically fighting for. That's the one where the EU has a political will, but also the country uses the EU integration as an anchor for its own developmental roadmap. And that's the one that I'm looking for also for Montenegro. Well, I believe that the convergence should be faster. This is where obviously economic policies should be better. I'm, currently relatively unhappy with the convergence, vis-a-vis the EU average. I think that the potential for Montenegrin annual growth is 5 to 6%, and this is what the target of the government should be. By the way, we, again ended up with the Chinese being selected to construct a major highway in Montenegro. So let's see how how that will evolve. But definitely, we need to diversify away from tourism, and to do something about it, not only to speak about it. Number one. Number two is energy production. It's a huge potential for Montenegro. Montenegro is already exporter of energy, and we are the only Balkan country that has a connection with Italy. So most of the trade which is happening between the Balkans and Italy actually goes through Montenegro. So that's huge potential. And the third one is, to get in the EU as soon as possible in order to be able to use some of the structural funds in order to make our infrastructure, especially roads and municipal infrastructure, better for our economy to be able to flourish even more. So those are three key, obviously this is a very complicated question, but given the fact that I have 30 seconds to answer it, this is my answer.